Hello, everyone, and welcome to the RealClearPolitics Takeaway for Thursday, April 15th. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP.
I'm Phil Wegmann, White House reporter for RealClearPolitics.
Standing in again for Carl Cannon, Phil. He's on vacation in Puerto Rico, visiting his new grandson. Phil, let's talk about your piece this morning that's on RealClearPolitics, because you got some scoop from the former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie. Explain.
Chris Christie is quickly emerging as one of the preeminent GOP brawlers because Chris Christie is doing what he's always done. He's being an attack dog. And at a moment when Republicans are beaten and bruised after losing both the House and the Senate and the White House, and then also after what happened on January 6th, there's some hesitance from Republican rank and file to be very aggressive. Christie says, no, forget all about that. Come out swinging. And in fact, he encouraged the Republican Study Committee just to call Biden a liar. That was a direct quote. He wants them to really go for the jugular because that's how he thinks that they're going to, in his words, make the election of Biden and Harris just a 4-year mistake.
And this was sort of a reprise of, he said this on ABC this week, last week, right? He called Joe Biden. He said, look, he's promised that he would unite the country, not divide by race, and he lied. That's exactly what he's doing. He took some heat from that, but it seems to be sort of classic Chris Christie. He seems to have gotten his mojo back. What was the reaction, as far as you could tell, from the Republican Study Group? Because Chris Christie was not always a favorite of the sort of Trump MAGA world. He definitely had his ups and downs with the 45th president of the United States.
Yeah, and Christie's one of these guys who was loyal to the president, and because of that loyalty, he earned Trump's trust. But like you mentioned a second ago, the biggest split here is when Christie is prepared to manage the transition team in 2016. At the last moment, that's sort of yanked away by Jared Kushner and company. And instead, that job goes to Mike Pence. And Christie, who was a loyal ally during the primary, during the general election, finds himself on the outside. What's interesting about that is that now, these years later, Christie sort of has some freedom, unlike other Trump acolytes, to tell Republicans what went wrong. And, to a packed house of Republicans looking for a way forward, he was pretty straightforward. He said, the reason we not only lost the White House, the reason we also lost those 2 Senate seats in Georgia is because Republicans were, running a presidential election like it was an election for student body council, and they let some of Trump's antics overshadow his accomplishments in Christie's estimation. And then 2, they convinced in Georgia voters who were headed to the runoff that just like the general election, this thing was rigged, and essentially they told their own supporters to stay home. Christie likened that to suicide.
So, we've got an interesting dynamic as we're looking to 2024, assuming Trump does not run, of course. But you have some of these folks who, let's call them the old guard. And even though they're not that old, I'm talking about the folks who've run for president before. But in the sort of in 2016, in the sort of pre-Trump era, right? Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Chris Christie, those folks. And then you've got sort of the new crowd, the Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, Kristi Noem. Is there an appetite for someone who's of that pre-Trump mold? I just remember at CPAC, which was held in Florida, Ron DeSantis got the most votes, I think 20-something% in a field without Donald Trump. But Marco Rubio registered like 1%. He was down there with Mitt Romney. I mean, he was nowhere. And this guy was on the verge of potentially winning the Republican nomination until he ran into, oh, by the way, Chris Christie on the debate stage in New Hampshire. But what is the sense? I mean, is there a path forward for Chris Christie if he decides that he wants to try again and run for president?
It's certainly something that he's not closing the door to. And what's so interesting about the fact that you have Chris Christie on Capitol Hill talking to the Republican Study Committee, which is the largest caucus of conservatives on Capitol Hill, is that if you rewind the clock, that's not a lunch date that happens. Christie is seen as a moderate Republican, and the RSC, they pride themselves on being the conservative conscience of Republicans. Those are two groups that traditionally, yeah, they might play for the same team, but they're not going to be the best of friends. I think what we might be seeing, though, is because Republicans are eager to undo the mistakes of 2020, they might be saying to themselves, well, maybe we don't need a candidate who is perfect. Maybe we don't need a candidate who checks all of our boxes. Similar to what a lot of Democratic primary voters, their voting calculus, when they were, pulling the lever for Joe Biden, maybe Republicans say he's not the perfect candidate, but we think that he's someone who could beat Joe Biden, and that's good enough for us. I think that Christie is certainly leaving the door open to that, and he's enjoying some celebrity at the moment. But again, 2024, it's a long way off.
All right, we will leave it there. For Phil Wegmann, our White House reporter, I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics, and this has been the RCP Takeaway for Thursday, April 15th.